Hello, this is Graham. Sorry I can't pick up. Please leave a message.
Hello, Graham. It's your mother. I'm just ringing you about the stuff you've got in the spare room. You know, all those pictures, and I don't know what you've got there altogether. But I wonder when you'll be able to move it, because I got Violet coming to stay in a day or two, because I don't want that room looking all like that untidy when she's here. And by the way, if you're in Falmouth any time, I could do a few things in Coil. You know, they got lots of things. They got 15% off down there certain days. And, you know, if you ring me any time, I can tell you anything that I want. But I'm just going on and chatting away because I'm hoping you might pick up, Gray. Sometimes you do, you know. I expect you're busy somewhere. You may be down west with Ian. Doing that thing that you were on about the other day. And because it's a nice day, you could be down there doing that, I suppose. And I'm here now doing one or two things. Well, getting me dinner ready, actually. All right, Gray. Be lovely to see you. All the best. Bye.
This is episode 2 of One Dark Night.
The cottage we're investigating has been part of the wild landscape above the village of Zena for over 2 centuries. Its sinister reputation comes from stories of murder, Satanism and black magic dating from the late 1930s. The Higgy Pop website has put it at number 4 in the UK's most popular paranormal hotspots of 2022. We know that ghost hunters regularly visit this place in the hope of making contact with spirits or demons. But back in the corporeal world, what can we learn from the previous owners of this place? Could they help us unlock its secrets? We know it was owned by the painter Brian Winter from the 1940s to the 1960s. After that, it was bought by a couple, an artist and her husband, a local GP. Graham has been trying to contact the family.
Hello. Do you want me to answer that?
It now looks like we might be making some progress.
That was a woman from the family who owned that cottage for decades, and she said she can tell us what happened up there. She's got this great story.
We are now on our way to meet the couple's daughter, Nico. What story will she have to tell?
This is a place of wonderland. I sit here all alone. All I hear is the rustle of grass and a soft cuckoo sometimes.
Well, at least to begin with, a story of an idyllic childhood.
Music is all around, playing a sweet, soft melody.
This is Nico McKelberg, a petite woman with waves of blonde-grey hair. She has a broad smile and is full of life. She's reading from a book which contains some of her childhood poetry.
Singing is heard far away on the horizon. The foghorn is heard, then it is all quiet again.
This was a childhood of summers spent up above Zena, where her parents were now proud owners of the cottage.
They actually bought it in, I think, 1965 as a studio for my mum, which the previous owner, Brian Winter, had actually built, and also as a getaway for my father, because it was the only way he could actually get some protected time away from patients, which he loved his patients, but
he needed a break.
It was very, very difficult to get a proper break.
Nico's father was a prominent local GP, and her mother Margot was an artist. a painter who achieved fame relatively late in her career. Her obituary in The Times in 2014 says her talent was finally recognised by a 2008 solo retrospective at Tate's and Ives. It describes her landscape paintings as elemental, strong and silent.
So we used to go up there sort of alternate weekends, for holidays as well, and often would stay there with Mum during the summer holidays, and then Dad would come up and stay sort of weekends when he had a very odd weekend
So you
off.
kind of spent your summers up there, really?
Spent the summers, but also in the winters as well.
Oh, you did?
Yes, we used to go up there.
Because your mum wanted to go up and paint?
Well, Mother just loved painting, and the studio was just incredible setting. You could look over the Zenacon itself and all the fields over to Zenacoit.
Yeah.
So it just was a very, very magical place.
Right, magical.
And I just remember spending days there where you just played on all the rocks there. I used to give them all names.
Did you?
Like a polar bear and the Greek temple and the wishing well and all sorts, and just spent hours on the actual
On your own?
Yeah. Well, you could just, those days you used to go out in the morning, didn't you? And
Didn't come back to the end of the
till
day.
it was tea time.
Amazing, isn't it? She just wandered on the moors all day, really.
Yeah.
Nico remembers how her mother was very much part of a community of artists, some of whom had achieved international fame.
Bernard Leach, Barbara Hepworth, I mean, just knew them all.
And what were they like?
I always remember with Barbara Hepworth, she had the most gravelly voice
Did
you
she?
ever did.
Smoker's voice.
Really gravelly, because I think she smoked a lot. Mother was good friends with Barbara, and I remember once we went to her, where where she's got the gardens there now, where they've got the Barbara Hepworth Museum, but she actually lived there at the time. And I was looking at all the different things, and she was like, yeah, let the child play, let the child play. She didn't mind if I was climbing on the...
All her kit, she didn't mind?
No, didn't mind at all.
Bless her.
And I used to like going there with Mum. It was always fascinating to see her at work.
Nico tells us that the cottage and the surrounding landscape is the subject of one of her mother's paintings. Could there be some clues here which will give us an insight into this mysterious place? She takes us to have a look for ourselves.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
It's got it just glows, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've got that great big sun, which you used to get often in the car when it's like a clear sky, and you can see it just giving that warmth. You can sort of feel the warmth coming off you. In the foreground there, again, you've got the actual cairn itself with all the gorse and the lovely colours. But what I love about this painting is you've actually got, that is the cottage.
Yeah.
So
is that the path sort of down to Eagle's Nest, that way?
The path would be probably more down that way.
More that way. Because in that painting, she's just put the cottage in the centre of the painting almost, in a dark spot, and all around it is this beautiful warmth again.
And it's sort of blending in.
It is.
Yeah. But I just love it. It just glows.
Yeah, it does. And there's a sun in the sky. I love this little bit in the foreground too, at the bottom left of the painting. There's just a touch of, it's very abstract, but you can read that to be foliage or heather or something there that just grounds the painting.
And also you can sort of feel that you've got the sea then the other side, sort of think, if I just could look over, I could actually...
You can see the sea.
Yeah.
And she's got the sky, you can see her brush marks and maybe even her finger marks in some of it. You can feel the artist in the painting very much. She's there, isn't she?
She
absolutely there.
Yeah, her and Cornwall, you couldn't really
you can't separate them. No, it's her. The way you describe the cottage and the surrounding land is not, in a way, the way that I've always seen it when I've passed that part of the world. It's not dark at all, is it? There's nothing dark about it.
Yeah, there's nothing dark there. It's just like...
It's mysterious. There's nothing in the landscape particularly that, it all suggests story, but it's not, there's no darkness.
No.
Not even the cottage, which is black in the middle. It's not dark, is it? It's just
it's just
there.
Yeah, on this horizon there.
Beautiful work.
It is fascinating to hear about the rich history of the cottage, Nico's experiences on the moors, and to see Margot's wonderful paintings. But it was almost as if Nico is talking about a different cottage to the one that we've been investigating. How can the same place have such different stories? An idyllic childhood retreat that was also home to devil worshippers. But then Nico begins to talk about things that happened, strange incidents which seemed difficult to explain. The cottage, it appeared, had a life of its own.
Every now and again, monks used to come. It was as if it was on some sort of pilgrimage.
Really?
So Mother jumped into the car and she'd go hurtling off, and she'd end up making tea with bracken. They used to come, not every year or anything, but every now and again they would just appear in their robes.
What kind of monks?
Tibetan Buddhist monks.
And then the next story Nico tells us is even stranger and more mysterious.
There's been a couple of really bad gorse fires up on the Carn, and I remember the second one, I don't know the date itself, but I think it was in the late 60s probably. It was in the night, and my parents were called. There was this very bad fire, and so they left me with my brother, and off they went to help with the fire brigade to try and beat the bushes. This was the second big fire there, but it was much worse than the first, and there was quite a wind up. And at one point, it seems the fireman said to my parents, "I'm afraid we can't save the cottage. You know, there's just no way. It's just totally..."
Fire's coming in.
And inexplicably, the wind just suddenly dropped down. They were able to put the actual fire out, and the next day, when everything had died down, the cottage was totally fine,
untouched,
with like a circle all around it where all the gorse around it had been burnt.
That's incredible.
And that's what the fire brigade said. They said it was just, they couldn't explain how that had happened. So, you know, obviously my mother said, well, that just shows.
What did she say? It just shows
being
what?
protected. Okay. There's something there.
There's something protecting you in that cottage.
Protecting the cottage. It's got a very special spiritual, I would say.
Is it?
And I understand it is on like a ley line.
You're thinking maybe that ley line is...
which goes through to Zenacoit. So it actually does seem to be quite a mystical, spiritual place.
So is this evidence of some unearthly power at work here? Or is it a case of coincidence and good luck with the weather? And then Nico says something which suggests her mother knew something of the reputation of the cottage. Something that perhaps made her anxious about taking her children there.
Before they actually agreed to buy the cottage, my parents, my mother took my brother and myself up there, and I would have been about 7 at the time. And she walked us into the cottage, and she said something that sounded a bit odd to me. She said, "How does this cottage make you feel?" Why is she asking us that? I mean, she probably protected us a bit. She always said that the powers of good was much stronger.
A suggestion there that the cottage itself has retained some essence of the sinister event that happened there. Let me put it this way. If I take an audio recorder like this cassette machine and record myself saying something, for example, "Bury me in a nameless grave in the churchyard at Zena," the magnetic tape captures my voice. "Bury me in a nameless grave in the churchyard at Zena." If I'd done this 50 years ago, I could still play back that recording today. Actually, it was in fact 50 years ago that a ghost story written by Nigel Neal for a BBC drama used the idea that a human's energy or emotions are captured or recorded in the stone of a building. The drama was called a stone tape, and stone tape theory, from which it takes its name, is what some in the paranormal field use to explain hauntings which replay what's happened in the past. "Bury me in a nameless grave
in the churchyard at Zena.
Well, even if we can't replay the events of that tragic night, we are going to have to look further into the past to get to the heart of this story. There is one thing that I've discovered, and that is that Graham never leaves the house without his thermos flask. So after we leave Nico, we park up by the side of the road to have a tea break while we watch the world go by.
Oh, you're recording, are you?
I'm recording everything.
You're recording everything now.
Yeah. Even your dreams. No, they're waiting for a bus, can you see?
Yeah, they are. Those people are going to be waiting a long time for that bus. There's not another one till Thursday.
Oh, no, they're hugging now.
It's got desperate.
Do you think there's an emotional moment which is related to the non-arrival of the bus? Yeah, I've got this idea, which I thought I'd pitch to you now, for a new podcast.
A new podcast?
Yeah, it's two men in the car.
Stakeouts.
And they just park up in somewhere in the UK.
It's a great idea.
And just describe everything that they can see from their car.
Drinking tea.
Drinking tea, yeah. Actually, I'll have another slurp of that.
I'm going to do my Nana now. My Nana used to do this. Lana Nana, she was called. She used to go...
Yeah, I had a girlfriend who used to do that.
Yeah.
And I said, why are you doing that? Because I was a bit irritated, to be honest. And she said, because if you drink tea that way, it tastes better.
Wow, kinky.
So we've got tea, but if we were actually doing that podcast, we could be more elaborate. We could have a fondue set on the dash.
We could do it live and ask people to suggest what we could cook next.
We could actually do steaks on the steak.
We could, yeah.
Real steaks. Oh, I think going with the times, though, we'd need to do a variety. We need to do vegan dishes as well.
I think this must be the St. Just bus.
It's actually called the St. Just bus, is it?
St. Just bus.
Oh, they're all smiling at us.
They were.
Maybe we look like cops. In an unmarked car, police, and they're looking, thinking, oh, God, I'm glad they're parked up. I feel invested now. I kind of think I want to wait till the bus arrives.
You do, don't you? I know. You're completely into it.
Oh, look, the bus hasn't stopped. He's shaking his head now. Look, they're looking at the bus stop now. I think they're looking perplexed.
When I went to see Maggie of Norwood, the famous clairvoyant, South London...
when was this?
Probably about 25 years ago. I think she very much believed that she could see spirits. I mean, literally see them in the room and describe them to me. She said that she believes that I had some channeling ability.
So, all this stuff that we've been hearing about and the different goings-on at the cottage, but you don't really believe any of that, do you?
Well, I kind of do, yeah. I do, because of my own personal experience of it. You know, when I was a kid. I said, didn't I, that I used to see faces coming out of the darkness, and they weren't imaginary. They weren't I didn't imagine them. They were really there.
But you could explain that by some sort of psychological thing, couldn't you?
Maybe. Kind of what? Like a sort of... like an expression of grief or something like that, do you mean? Sort of loss.
Or is it really that you just think, wouldn't it be fantastic if these spirits actually exist? That's for you, it's a much better story.
Well, my brother died, when I was young. I told you that. Did I tell you that story, Ian? I was tiny. I was 3 years of age and my brother was 2. And we lived in a little village in Cornwall. And my mum was working in the village shop and my father was looking after us, and he took us around to see my Auntie Jean and Uncle Clarence, who lived in a house in the village. And we just wandered in, delighted to be there, really looking forward to seeing Jean, who was just the loveliest, most maternal woman you could possibly wish to meet. And she was doing some washing in the kitchen. She was loading a washing machine in the days before washing machines were plumbed in. she boiled some water and was hand loading it into the machine itself. And we ran into the kitchen, and she probably turned and said perhaps a little sharply, "Go on, out you go, you two, go on, don't come in here, it's dangerous." And my 2-year-old brother took a step backwards and sat in a bucket of boiling water. They flew him from Cornwall up to Bristol to the specialist burns unit there, and he died.
You were only 3. I mean, can you really remember much about it?
No, probably not. But I did. When I was a young adult, I was probably about 21, I think. I had a very, very vivid dream, more vivid than any other dream I've ever had. Actually, and with kind of all sort of dream add-ons to stories that I might have been told. So things like we were both wearing yellow sou'westers, for instance, strange things like that, and that my brother, after the accident that happened, was placed on a dining room table and wrapped in a cotton sheet. Lots and lots of detail in the dream, and I told my father it, and I didn't really speak to my mum about it, but I did talk to my father about it and said, this is the dream I had, and this is what was in it. And according to him, a lot of the details that I'd had in the dream actually were things that had really happened. We were wearing yellow coats. He was wrapped in that sheet. So I kind of wondered whether, as a young child, you block out things that are particularly traumatic. And that perhaps, I mean, this is me being kind of amateur psychologist, so I don't know if there's any truth in this whatsoever, but perhaps when you're of an age or of a maturity when you could deal with some of those memories, perhaps that's what happened to me. I got some of those memories back in a dream.
When you hear the stories that we're hearing, people who think that they're in touch with spirits are able to tap into a supernatural world, how keen are you to believe in all that?
Well, the rational part of me says that when you're dead, you're dead. But there is a part of me too that clings to the hope, I suppose, of that you would meet people again, that it might be possible in death to be reunited with people you may have loved in this life and lost. So rationally, no, but nonetheless, even though I can rationalize it and come to a conclusion for myself that perhaps this is unlikely, hey, you never know. You just never know, and it still fascinates me enough to want to explore it in great detail.
So if there was the possibility that you could somehow make contact with your brother, that'd be something you want to do?
Yeah, why ever not? Why wouldn't you? Come on. Where are we going?
Well, I thought, we'd do some proper research. Oh. So I think we should head to the library. What?
Proper research in the library. So, okay, so we go to the cottage, yeah? We go to the cottage where we got the chance to do proper research. And you're like, what are you going to find out when you go in the cottage? Instead of that, now you're going to go do a bloody library.
Yeah, because we want some facts for this story.
What are we going to find in the library, Ian, for God's sake? So tell you what. You drive. I'll pull over.
Right. Okay. How do you switch this thing on?
Put your foot on that and then put it.
Okay. So you're going to come in with me?
Would you mind if I didn't?
Okay. Well,
I'm quite happy to
this
sit
is
here.
this is
This
the
is your
hard
thing.
groundwork.
Yeah,
that
well, no, you're good at
journalism
that.
is.
Yeah, you're good at
it's
that.
finding out what actually happened
Yeah.
with the facts. So, okay.
Yeah,
well,
you do the journalism
I'll
thing,
crack
and
on with that.
I'll sit here and sort of
Okay.
have a little think.
Right.
Okay, cool. Stake out in a Cornish village. Hi, Mum. No, I'm just thinking about you. Wondering if you're okay. All right.
Well, that was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps not surprising. I've just emerged from a library with a book, but I think this is something you're going to want to see.
The book I've given to Graham is by a writer called Paul Newman, who describes how, 30 years ago, sitting in a pub in Cornwall, he heard a story of a young couple who'd been drawn into a web of black magic by a notorious Satanist that resulted in a death. The couple disappeared, apparently. She killed herself and he went mad. What follows in the book are Newman's attempts to gather the various versions of this story and then to piece together what happened. He called the book The Tregurthan Horror, Tregurthan being an area to the east of Zena, the location of a cottage where this satanic ritual took place. We're going to use this book as a guide as we walk through what Newman says happened that night.
Here we are. We're standing opposite Eagle's Nest, a big beautiful house on a craggy outcrop of rock between St Ives and Zena, which Paul Newman, in his extraordinary book The Tregurthan Horror, about the events of that night, tells us that on the night in question, which was the 21st of May 1938, the victim of our story, a woman by the name of Catherine Cox, known locally as Carr, left her house, crossed this road and stepped onto the path that led up to the cottage on the moor. So why is Carl walking up here now? This steep path that leads up to the cottage through the gorse. She'd befriended a gravely disturbed young woman who lived in the cottage with her husband, and they, according to the rumours, were associating with a menacing group of people from London led by a man called Aleister Crowley, a Satanist who at the time styled himself as the Great Beast. So Carr would have walked the same path that we're walking now. She would have come to the same wall that we're seeing, the garden wall, the boundary to the cottage. She would have crossed through here, through a little gate maybe that may have been here at the time, and walked up and knocked on the door. What she wanted to do was to bring that vulnerable young woman to safety. And what happened next? There are lots of conflicting accounts, but what's generally agreed is that this character, Crowley, was in the process of conjuring a spirit, and that Carr confronted him, and as a result of that she collapsed. Now, she collapsed either because out of shock because of what she'd witnessed in the cottage, or maybe as a direct result of what Crowley did when he was confronted. We don't know. What we do know is that she never recovered consciousness, and she died shortly afterwards. There was an investigation by the Chief Constable of Cornwall at the time, but whatever conclusions he came to were never made public. So Crowley was never charged or prosecuted with anything. He got away scot-free. But there was one character in that cottage that night who didn't get away with it. And that wasn't the vulnerable young woman that Carr came to rescue. It was her husband, John Vaughan, who, as a result of what he witnessed that night, was taken away and confined to a mental hospital. So what did he see? What did Carr witness that cost her her life?
We've reached the end of episode 2, and we're beginning to discover more details about this cottage and what happened there on that tragic night. But there are still more questions than answers. Nico tells us that monks used to visit this remote cottage in Cornwall. What reasons could there be for that? If you have any thoughts or suggestions, then do let us know. Is there any scientific basis for the stone tape theory? Could it be possible that the stone that makes up the cottage has somehow recorded events from the past? Paul Newman, in his book, admits the difficulty in finding hard evidence to back up the rumours of black magic and satanic rituals in the cottage. So why has this story persisted for over 80 years? We'd love to hear any theories or thoughts, so do let me and Graham know. You can find us on social media with a hashtag OneDarkNight, or you can email us onedarkpodcast@gmail.com. Next time, we discover a whole trove of artefacts that belonged to the so-called wickedest man in the world, Aleister Crowley. Do join us then.